Bagaliza kawungezi kalungi ne munange kalungi Rosette gwe tubadde tukola naye.
And also a possible disabler, even if you do not die and survive its attack. In the USA, 196,465 people have died from this disease. In the last 6 months, many more than the 58,000 Americans that died in the 10 years of the war in Vietnam, which was between 1964 and 1974. 134,000 Brazilians have died, 35,000 in Italy, 30,000 in Spain, 41,000 in the UK, 85,000 in India, 15,000 in South Africa, and 646 in Kenya, etc. Furthermore, among the many that survive, some may get scarring, enkovu, of the internal organs, the lungs, and the other organs are affected through secondary means of intravascular coagulation, according to these doctors. Therefore, as one doctor working for the USA Center for Disease Control said, in quotes, "It is much better not to have this disease," end of quotes. So the idea that we shall get the disease and be cured, yes, you may be cured, but one is not sure whether you will have your full life again. This is the first characteristic of this disease: killer and also possible disabler. This is the first characteristic. The second characteristic is that it is very easy to avoid if you agree to undergo a lot of the inconvenience of the lockdown and the losses, economic, social, that come with the restrictions. Right from the beginning, I had no doubt as to the right course of action. Life was more important than wealth. Amagara gachira magana, the Banyankole say. Well, life is more important than wealth. Amagana means wealth, hundreds. That is why between the 18th of March and the 30th of March 2020, I, with the approval of the National Task Force and the Cabinet, imposed a total of 35 restrictions as follows. We closed all the educational institutions, which account for 15 million young Ugandans. We suspended communal prayers in the mosques, churches, or in the stadia and other open-air venues. We stopped all public political rallies, cultural gatherings, or conferences. Banned Ugandans from moving to or through Category 1 countries that had had a large number of corona cases by that time. We only allowed returning Ugandans, provided they underwent mandatory quarantine at their cost for 14 days at a venue identified by the Minister of Health. We, however, allowed the non-agricultural gatherings, gathering points, e.g. factories, hotels, large plantations, markets, tax parks, etc., to continue, provided they follow the SOPs put out by the Ministry of Health. We discouraged the hexagonal, extravagant, Ugandan-style weddings. Weddings were allowed only for a maximum of 7 people. Burials could not be postponed, but only a maximum of 10 should take part in the burial. We suspended the weekly or monthly markets such as cattle auction markets, Ebukomera, and food markets of Tare in the rural areas. At that time, we were allowed public transport systems of buses, minibuses, taxis, boda-bodas, etc. to continue, provided they were given SOPs. We suspended all the discos, dances, bars, sports, music shows, cinemas, and concerts. We advised the public to maintain hygiene measures such as not coughing or sneezing in public, no spitting, washing with soap and water or using sanitizers, regularly disinfecting surfaces such as tables, door handles, and not touching your eyes, nose or mouth with contaminated and unwashed hands. We advise the public on good nutrition, on how to strengthen the body defense system. We stopped all passengers coming to Uganda by air, land or water. This affected incoming planes, buses, taxis or boats. We closed the Entebbe International Airport and all the other border points of entry except for cargo aeroplanes and for trucks, cargo trucks. We prohibited pedestrians from entering into the country from the neighboring countries. All public passenger transport vehicles were later stopped, i.e. taxis, coasters, buses, passenger trains, tuk-tukus, the tricycles, and boda-bodas. Only food sellers would remain in the markets. The non-food sellers suspended their activities. Private vehicles were initially allowed to continue, but with only 3 people maximum per vehicle at that time. Ambulances, army vehicles, garbage collection vehicles, etc., those ones continued. Later on, we banned the movement of all privately owned passenger vehicles because owners had abused them by turning them into taxis. We suspended the shopping arcades, hardware shops, which gather a lot of people to sell and buy non-food items. These were suspended for 14 days, starting on the 1st of April 2020. We directed all the non-food shops to close. Only food shops selling agricultural products, veterinary products, detergents, and pharmaceutical products remained open. Home deliveries were instead encouraged. The supermarkets remained open, but with clear SOPs that restricted numbers that entered and left the site at a given time and the handling of trolleys within the supermarkets. The established food markets in Kampala and other towns continued to be open while maintaining social distancing. The The sailors were not allowed to go home during the 14 days. They had to arrange to stay nearby for that duration. Saloons, lodges, and garages were also shut for 14 days from the 1st of April 2020. Like the farms, factories could remain open, but the owners had to arrange for the crucial employees to camp around the factory area for the 14 days. If they could not do that, they were ordered to suspend production for 14 days. Construction sites could continue if they could be able to encamp their workers for 14 days. Otherwise, they had to suspend construction for the 14 days. The essential services, the medical, agriculture, the veterinary, telecommunications, door-to-door delivery, financial institutions, all media, private security companies, cleaning services, garbage collection, fire brigade, fuel stations, water departments, funeral services, and some KCCS staff could continue to operate. Cargo transport by train, plane, lorry, pickup, tukutukus, boda and bicycle within Uganda and between Uganda and the outside had to continue, but only with minimum numbers technically needed as was described at that time. URA was also told not to close business on account of not paying taxes in those 14 days. Gatherings of more than 5 persons were prohibited. Except for cargo planes, lorries, pickups and trains, starting with the 31st of March 2020 at 1900 hours, there was a curfew throughout the whole of Uganda up to 6:30 a.m. In order to deal with other health emergencies, permission could be sought from the RDC to use private transport to take a sick person to hospital. Additionally, government vehicles that did not belong to UPDF, police, prisons, or UWA, Uganda Wildlife Authority, were pulled and deployed at the district health offices, including the divisions of Kampala, with their drivers staying in tented compounds ready to help in those health emergencies. Those vehicles were under the command of the district medical officer. Borders were ordered to stop their operations at 2 p.m. at that time. On account of those tough measures, we limited the spread of the infections, and the few imported cases were closely handled by the medical staff so that all of them recovered, and we never had a single death from COVID-19 until the 21st of July 2020. This was a period of about 126 days of battle with the coronavirus without a single death. Congratulations, Ugandans, for that historic achievement. This proved that the COVID-19 virus could be avoided and the few infected could survive if you acted right. As usual, we had the usual enemies of Uganda and Africa who started saying that there was no COVID-19 and that it was dictator Museveni who was using the cover of the COVID-19 to stop the opposition from winning over the masses. In any case, after careful study of each situation, we and the scientists were getting convinced that provided we strictly adhered to the guidelines, we could reopen many sectors of the economy and activities such as public transport, borders, non-food shops, hotels and food restaurants, using private cars, etc. There were detailed guidelines for each activity. Our scientists are sure that if people strictly adhere to the guidelines, they will be safe. Let us take the example of public transport. A vehicle, a minibus, which should normally carry 14 persons, was now supposed to only carry 7 persons, and no air conditioning, and provided everybody is putting on a mask and so on, activity by activity. If the vehicle owners and the passengers adhere to this, people would be safe and the activity would go on without any problem. The problem, however, is that many people, spurred on by the false prophets who are saying that there was no danger, never bothered to adhere to the guidelines. In the book of Galatians, chapter 6, verses 7 to 8, it says that whatever man sows, that is what he will reap. The exact quotation goes as follows: do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. For he who sows to the flesh will of the flesh reap corruption, but he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. End of quotes. Similarly, in this case, by sowing negligence and disobedience, we are now harvesting more sickness and even more death. Yet God had shielded us from the death until the 21st of June 2020. Today, the total sickness with COVID-19, that is to say, the positive cases, are now 6,287. Those who have recovered are 2,616. And those who have died are now 63. Nevertheless, we cannot reverse the relaxation measures themselves, but we should put emphasis on the observance of the respective SOPs, activity by activity. The increasing number of the people dying from the corona, which has covered the young and the old, the unhealthy and the healthy, people with no what they call comorbidities, should by now have convinced the skeptical that this is no joke. Our sensitization should now shift to the individual and to the community to look after his or her life, his or her health, and their health as a community. No bunching or crowding. Always wear a mask while in public or even at home if you are with strangers. Ensuring social distancing of 4 meters from one another in public or even at home in case you receive new people who have not been part of the household recently. Constantly washing your hands with water and soap or with alcohol-based sanitizers. Never touch your nose, mouth, or eyes with unwashed hands. And in offices and other workplaces, always sanitize surfaces with alcohol-based sanitizers, as well as sterilizing documents with sterilizers that reach the temperature of 65 degrees because this virus cannot survive at that temperature or beyond. Given this avoidability vis-à-vis the virus, provided the SOPs are strictly followed at the group and personal levels, the virus could and can be contained. Therefore, my job today is to again emphasize the two tasks. One, for group behavior, and two, for individual behavior. With this emphasis, it is now time to further relax the restrictions as follows. Number one, we have decided to reopen schools for the candidate classes of P7, S4, S6, finalists in tertiary colleges, and finalists in universities. Why? Number one, we think that it is safe because the finalists in each learning institution are a much smaller number compared to the total enrollment in these centers. Indeed, the total number of finalists is 1.2 million learners out of the total of 15 million, i.e. less than 10%. Therefore, each group of finalists will have bigger space for social distancing, whether they are in the day schools or boarding schools. If they follow the SOPs, they will be safe. Moreover, the cost of waiting any further is quite high. Why? It is because of the jam that will be created in terms of the usual transition from the primary school, the lower secondary schools, the higher secondary schools, the tertiary colleges, and the universities respectively. If the batch of 2020 do not move on, what will happen to the batch of 2021? Can we afford to have the two batches in 2021? The answer is a clear no. Fortunately, it can be done safely if people follow the SOPs. A solution for the non-finalist learners will be found by January 2021. International schools that have got less numbers can engage the Ministry of Health on the way forward. The schools will open for the finalists on the 15th of October 2020. We are aware of the dilemma of the private schools that were operating on money from banks, etc. We have tried to help the teachers in the private schools by giving them Uganda shillings 20 billion grant for their saako. I had some private school teachers that were complaining that the government was not caring about them. This is a grant, not a loan by the government of 20 billion shillings. It's a grant. This is your bank now, you can use it. We shall continue to study and see how the government can affordably further support these Ugandans, the teachers in the private schools. The schools will now open in the limited way pointed out above. If for some reasons there are private schools that cannot reopen on account of the obvious disruption of the business of the private schools, because the private schools were doing business, education as a business. They were doing education as a business. And now the business atmosphere is not good because of this disease. So even when we open, if some schools do not open because of the business economics can no longer work out, the Minister of Education is already directed to expand the number of secondary schools. We are assuming a secondary school enrollment of 2 million learners just for the Kibaro. We assumed 2 million secondary school students, although the actual number is now 1.6 million. If we take one classroom and one teacher to cater for 50 learners, we need 40,000 classrooms and 40,000 classroom teachers. If you assume a school of 2 streams per class up to S4, and then a science and an arts class for S5 and S6, each school would be having 12 classroom units. This will therefore mean about, to cater for the 2 million students, we'd need about 3,340 secondary schools to accommodate the 2 million secondary school learners. The government already has 1,267 secondary schools, and we are planning, although this number keeps changing. The other day they were talking of another number, but now they are talking of 1,267 secondary schools, government ones. And we are planning to build another 374 new schools. I direct the Minister of Education to study the number of community schools that the government can take over in the areas that do not have government secondary schools. If the worst comes to the worst, the government should have the capacity to absorb into government schools all the learners and even the teachers that are shed off by the private schools on account of the financial difficulties facing private schools precipitated by the COVID-19 crisis. The Minister of Finance should also meet the owners of the private schools and see how the government could come to their aid. The government should not only think of rescuing the learners and the teachers and remain oblivious of the plight of those Ugandan entrepreneurs that invested in private schools because they did not know that a terrible disease would come from the bats in distant China and cause so much chaos. Can UDB help? What is the magnitude of the money involved? The government plan for distance learning through the provision of the 9 million radio sets is on course. The money is available and those radios will be provided. That route of alternative learning will continue to be consolidated, not only for dealing with the present crisis, but also for the future. I would want Ugandans to really understand the importance of this distance learning. In other parts of the world, learning is continuing. The children don't have to take the risk of going to gather. They learn through the internet. Children are sitting in Kampala, they are doing exams given in the US. I had one of my children who was at the University of Bath. He had not finished his last some of his last papers. He ran here and he did his papers here and he finished. He's here with us. So this route of distance learning is a very good route, and we're going to consolidate it. Now some people are saying, I'm saving, you are wasting money. When you buy the radios, the fathers will take them from the children and use them to listen to disco. That one we shall struggle with. We have struggled with many problems. That strategy of distance learning may have some advantages, such as democratizing access by all to good teachers. If there is a good teacher, you normally hear, oh, there is a good teacher for science at Nabsunsa, another one somewhere there. That's why children are doing well in the other school. Okay, if we have got such good teachers, let all the children share them through distance learning, instead of being monopolized by the few who listen to the good teacher. Secondly, the international airport and land borders will now be opened for tourists coming in and going out, provided they tested negative 72 hours before arrival in Uganda, and provided the tour operators ensure that the tourists do not mix with Ugandans. How will this be done? The tourists will be driven straight from the airport to their destinations or to designated transit hotels that are set aside for that purpose. Business delegations should also be handled in the same way by local partners. The returning Ugandans who have got negative PCR results, PCR are the tests, will be allowed to go home, not stay in the quarantine, but you go to your home, and the Ministry of Health will only get their addresses for follow-up. Number 3, restrictions on the movements on the border districts are hereby lifted. Number 4, curfew from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., which has been in force, will be maintained. But for the borders, their movements must always end at 1800 hours, which is 6 p.m. Number 5, the places of worship should open with the following precautions: individual prayers or confessions with priests or counseling with the necessary SOPs. Those are all right. When somebody is coming to confess his sins to the priest, there are few of them, they can, that one may not be a problem. Prayers and fellowships whose numbers do not exceed 70, and by observing all the other SOPs, we think these ones are safe. Night prayers and transnights are, however, not allowed. Night prayers and transnights, we don't allow those. The regular large gatherings of prayers and preachings of Sundays and Fridays will be considered at a later stage, depending on how the disease will be evolving. But the rule of the number of 70 and not more can be used on Fridays and Sundays. So that rule of not more than 70 can actually be used on a number of days. You can have some on Monday, another group on Tuesday and Friday, as long as the numbers are 70. There should be no Sunday school for children. Let the enemy first go away before the children are involved in this congregating. Okwerundana. They say the Wanyankwere call it. Six, open air activities of sports will reopen provided there are no spectators. We must learn to have games without spectators, without abatuluzi, abarorezi. We shall watch on TV. The teams can play, we watch from far. And the players, provided the players are tested for COVID-19 72 hours before. This test will expire in 14 days. So every 14 days they must test the players. Hence the sportsmen will have to repeat the test. Sportsmen and women should remember that masks should not be worn when you are engaged in strenuous exercises. B, with tournaments, teams should be quarantined for the whole season of the competition. C, indoor sports activities, including gyms, remain closed. Those indoor things are very dangerous because that's where the virus spreads. Why do we say those should remain closed? It is because the virus spreads more in enclosed spaces. Number 7, casinos, gaming centers, and cinemas remain closed. Why? It is because those activities are in enclosed spaces and are not compatible with social distancing. 8, bars shall remain closed. Why? It is because bars, apart from many of them being in enclosed spaces, which phenomenon favor the rapid spread of the virus, are not known for sobriety. And lack of sobriety is not compatible with health safety through the observance of the health SOPs. Abatamivu tebasobola okwefuga, tebasobola kwekuuma. That's why really bars, I know many Ugandans like bars, but you can get drunk at home. Just order your beer and you get drunk at home, you sleep in your sitting room. It's not good, but at least there's no, assuming that there's nobody with COVID in your house, you can get drunk without COVID. So I don't see really why people should spend so much time quarreling. Because beer is not stopped. You buy and take home. Drink there. Number 9, hotels will continue operating following the SOPs agreed with the Ministry of Health. We had already addressed those before. 10, restaurants should continue to emphasize the takeaways. Indoor restaurant services should be minimized and follow the SOPs. Mobile markets, monthly cattle auction and produce markets should remain closed as the Ministry of Health continues to develop the SOPs. Mass gatherings are still prohibited. Some people have been trying to use the recent NRM elections to justify their own misbehaviors. Lining behind candidates is not the same as holding public meetings. lining behind candidates would have been done scientifically. If our people were mindful, they could have done it. Because you can line scientifically, because it is, you just line for a limited time and go away. If the organizers had been serious. But with public meetings, there's no way you can observe social distancing. If you're having a rally, how are you going to organize social distancing? A rally? How? Especially in the rural areas with the small football pitches, small open spaces, where would you do social distancing? Our Bamasaba grandchildren that are engaged in Imbalu in this month, Imbalu is circumcision, have SOPs from the Ministry of Health that were agreed with the cultural institution. But I hear that these SOPs are not being followed. That's what I hear. There should be no processions dancing Kadodi, because those processions are the ones which result into crowding. That is dangerous congregating. The security forces, especially the police, should monitor those activities. Cases of COVID-19 have gone up in Mbale recently. There are now 107 cases reported in Mbale, and 5 deaths have occurred in that area. Ugandans, you have now tested both scenarios. Scenario number 1 was strict lockdown. We started with until the 4th of May 2020. During that time, the infection was low and there were no deaths. When we effected the interim relaxation measures, the infections expanded and the death increased. 1 means safety and no death. The other means more infections and death, especially if you do not observe the SOPs. Yet, we cannot and should not remain in lockdown indefinitely. Why? It is because the economy must grow. Otherwise, bigger problems may show up. Besides, in many cases, lockdown is not necessary. Why not? It is because we have already shown you how to be safe. We have shown you how we can be safe. It's not a theory, it's not something that you read about in the book, it's not something that you heard, it is something that we did. You do this, you will be safe. You don't do it, you will be in danger. A few weeks ago, I passed out 9,000 policemen and soldiers in Masindi and Kawaweta, respectively, safely. I'm sure you saw them on TV, large number of people. But we passed, they trained, passed them out. And when this virus started, the training had just started, the commanders asked me, should we close the train? I said, no. Don't allow visitors to come there. No visitors would be allowed in those camps. On passing out, we normally invite parents to come and be part of the passing out. This time with no parents. Let the parents watch on TV. So you can do things safely. These are big numbers, thousands of people training. Cheptegei and Kiplimo trained in lockdown. They flew out, although we had closed the airport, went and broke world records and came back safely. So these people who say we should remain locked down because no. We can open if people observe the precautions. Therefore, those who behave recklessly will reap what they would have sowed. We would therefore like to appeal to everybody to be your own health worker. Understand all the avoidance measures, put them in practice for your own good and for the good of others. That is why we are morally justified to open up, because we have taught you what to do except for the activities that are clearly risky, such as bars where sobriety is in great scarcity. It is a big shame to realize that out of the 6,287 cases of Corona-19 recorded in Uganda, 2,097 are in Kampala. So Kampala has taken the cup of promoting Corona. This is population of Kampala is, I hear 3 million, sometimes say 3 million. Population of Uganda is now 46 million. So 3 million is not even, I don't know whether it is even 5% of the population. But according to here, you are now responsible for more than 30% of the sick people in the whole of Uganda. You are only 5% or less, but you Camparians led by their powerful minister, Beta Mongi, who is here, they are responsible for now 30%, more than 30% of the corona cases. Why? Indiscipline and confusion. Nocha abana Kampala muluna bagamba kwekuba mu kifuba. Bagwekuba ko mu kifuba mwebuuze ku lwaki mmwe mututse ekikopo kino ekyasenyiga omukambwe. In the villages, people are so vigilant. They hunt any newcomer and hand him to the health authorities. I don't know whether these people have, they can give us figures of which, where the virus has gone up to the villages. Next time we shall share those with you. With guidance, the people in the villages can handle correctly the barriers, because I hear this some issue about the barriers people try to gather, and weddings. It is the Kampalians, Abana Kampala, that need to reform. Again, I totally reject the logic of those that complain about the effects of lockdown as if it is the government that causes the virus. I've told you before of the Nyankore proverb. Chifucha mutuma ngwenju yasya atumunyalire mbyame. Here, the Nyankore were referring to somebody of limited understanding who was told that the house was on fire, but for him he said, prepare the bed for me to sleep. Sleep where? The house is on fire. That would have been the answer from the rational, serious people. Look at the picture of the aircrafts that are parked with no business. I don't know whether these people can put that picture on the TV, on that TV. I'll put it in my document here. I don't know whether the TV people are able to put it for the viewers. Put it and we see it. I also want to see it.
2020 will be remembered as the year when the aviation industry was brought down to its knees by a pandemic which caught the world by storm. COVID-19 has left airlines and airports reeling from the deep plunge in the global passenger traffic. Flights have all but disappeared from the skies. The unprecedented freefall has also forced many airlines to the brink of bankruptcies. Bills have run into billions of dollars, and the outlook gets darker by the day. COVID-19 has shaken up the aviation industry. Will it be able to reinvent itself and recover from the impact of the pandemic? Or will the pandemic usher in its eventual collapse? 2020 has been described as the worst year in the history of aviation. The rapid spread of COVID-19 pandemic has clipped the wings of airlines around the world and ended its 20-year boom. Not only have low-cost airlines been hit hard by the sudden travel meltdown, full-fledged carriers have also not been spared as well. Many are now struggling to recover from the loss in passenger demand and the sharp decline in revenue. Even today, several airlines in the US and the UK have collapsed. Many others may also follow suit.
This crisis
2020 will be remembered as the year when the aviation industry was brought down to its knees by a pandemic which caught the world by storm. COVID-19 has left airlines and airports reeling from the deep plunge in the global passenger traffic.
We are waiting for the picture. I'm not living here. The Ugandans don't need to see me, they have seen me enough. They want that picture. Leave it there. Why you had to leave it? Ugandans, you can see how the airline industry has been hit. All those planes are packed, they have no business. And now we are talking about border, we are talking about the whole world is in trouble. We should not behave as if we are children who don't know what's happening in the world. It's a very serious event. So don't waste our time. Thank you very much. Okay, we can continue now. I continue now. So you have seen the picture of how hard the airline industry has been hit. Somebody told me that the shops that used to sell textiles in the USA and much of the West have gone bankrupt. Clothes are now sold online, through the internet or on phones. This is the way to go, Ugandan entrepreneurs. Ugandan entrepreneurs need to wake up. If there is a crisis of this type, you should know how to survive in it. Stop crying over spilt milk. Look for how to survive in the new atmosphere of Tonsemberera social distancing. See how to survive. Business people in Uganda need to be very cautious. Let us take public transport, public transporters. If it turns out that people are being infected because of crowding in public transport vehicles, that will be the end of that business, whether government lifts restrictions on public transport or not. If the information goes out that when you go in a taxi you get a virus, the business will die. Not because the government has closed or what, but because people fear for their lives. Some of the countries have opened, like we are now, who have opened we're going to open the airport. People may not come because they fear to fly. So if you care about your business, make it safe. If you want the hotels to open properly, open slowly, let people gain confidence that there's no danger by them coming to your hotel. If it is a public means of transport, make sure that you follow the regulations so that people are sure of their safety. If they don't, whether the government opens or not, those businesses will die. People will simply not come if your vehicle is not, if the public vehicles, the public transport vehicles are not safe for people. If information comes that among the people who are being infected, this is what we are talking about, this 6,000, that the majority of them are being infected in buses because of overcrowding, that business will die. The time for self-reception is over. Even if the government doesn't close the business, if you conduct yourself wrongly and people get at risk, the people will themselves boycott your business. Let us be serious. I cannot end this broadcast without talking about our scientists who have guided us through this crisis and who are also working on the 3 lines of our own diagnostics, our own vaccines, and our own therapeutics. Our scientists are looking for the vaccine, they are looking for our own diagnostics, they are looking for a possible therapeutic. Stay tuned, there may be pleasant news in the coming month from that side. We have given them all the support as far as the necessary funding is concerned. I'm sorry about the fire which was in the building of Makerere. We don't know how the fire started, but we already have some cases of some negligence. I'm sure the Vice Chancellor will be doing something about some stuff there about the negligence. Yesterday I was supposed to go to Jinja. I didn't go. I sent the vice president. This was because these masks, which are good for fighting the corona, but some of them, at least one type, affects my voice. So the other time when I went to Tanzania, I had put on a very strong one, and when I came back, my voice was affected. Even now, it's not fully recovered, but it is improving. So I didn't want to. I wanted to give it a rest, so that I'm able to speak to you today. That's why I sent the vice president and the speaker were there. Now, for the NRM people, those who are misbehaving during the primaries, those are not clever people. These people have been disturbing us for a long time. The people who are not democratic, who don't want the power, who don't want the people to exercise their power, to elect the people they want. The people elect X. These maneuverers want to nullify what the people have decided and put somebody else. When we are trying to use secret ballots, trying to do this, first we try to use the electoral college, to use a few leaders. I think at the district level. Now bribery was introduced, so that the leaders would be bribed to select flag bearers who are not popular with the people. That's why there was a demand that we should go for universal selection of flag bearers. Now, when we did that, then they started manipulating the secret ballot. Recently, that's when we decided to go to lining behind candidates. Incredibly, some of these people thought they could also cheat that people could line up 200 here, 100 here, then they go and change the facts on what they call declaration forms. This is just a waste of time, because people were there, they witnessed, they saw. So I have already carried out some audit. I carried out audit in some few areas, myself directly using the security services, and we are now going to upscale the audit. So I therefore call upon NRM members, don't be violent, don't fight. Why do you fight? Suppose you lose a tooth in this fighting, and you go with the edible, or you are like, you cannot speak properly because you lost your tooth. Fighting, you serious? There's no need to fight. Just get the facts, write to this man Tango Doi, give copy to Secretary General, but also give copy to the RDC. The RDC, some of them were involved, but this time they will see that it's not a joke. So that we get the complaint. Nobody will sit on your letter, I can assure you of that. Anybody who does will go to jail. Now, we shall come and audit what happened. Like in the area where we audited, I sent audit. Like in the case of Nyawshozi, we found that in 116 villages, the results were not contentious. They were all agreeing. There were 56 villages where results had been changed, and we put back the results, and now we know who is ahead with that, with the 172 villages, 116 plus 56. But then there are 28 villages that did not vote because of the confusion created. So I have written to those concerned to organize a repeat in the 28 villages, and then we shall get the answer. The facts are there. In Bukanga, the same. In Isingiro South, Isingiro North, we are doing some work in Chenkwanzi, some work in Buyende, and everywhere we shall send these teams. So don't fight, don't quarrel, but be firm. Don't allow anybody to cheat, to nullify our democracy. But no need for fighting. Don't fight, don't riot. It's not necessary. Just point out. I thank you. I wish you good luck.